Please welcome Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Arab Republic of Egypt and President of COP27, Sameh Shoukry. And our moderator, anchor for Bloomberg Television, Manus Cranny.
Minister, a very good afternoon. Welcome to the NEF 2022, and thank you for taking time away from the crowds at Sharm el-Sheikh. At the start of this COP, the UN Secretary General said, "We are on a highway to climate hell. Our foot is on the accelerator." You're coming to the close, and we're trying to get the deals over the line. Are we tapping the brakes in Sharm el-Sheikh? Or are we taking our foot off the gas? Minister.
That's certainly not the presidency's perspective or the presidency's objective. Our objective is to maintain the focus on climate action, that all parties should undertake their responsibilities, fulfill their commitments, and demonstrate the necessary ambition to go forward with the process and to achieve deliverables that can have a definitive impact on the climate change agenda. It is up to the parties to demonstrate the political will that was expressed by their leaders during the summit on the 7th and the 8th, and that political will should be translated in the negotiating rooms and should show the necessary flexibility and accommodations by all to move the process forward.
If I say to you as it stands right now, what are the biggest wins, and between the close of business of this gathering, what will be the biggest victory? How would you define that at this juncture?
Well, I believe that overall, in all of the areas, whether it is mitigation, adaptation, finance, or loss and damage, we must demonstrate during this COP that there is a movement and an inertia towards deliverables. And we want to maintain what was achieved in Paris and subsequently in Glasgow, but to demonstrate also that there is a path forward, that we will provide for the COP28 the necessary platforms to achieve more in doing what we need all to do collectively with the principles of common responsibility and differentiated capabilities, that this collective will is demonstrated in impactful measures.
We have the initial cover decision, I understand, and the top line on that, COP holds off on its pledge to phase down oil and gas. Now, of course, India, we know, put on the table they wanted to phase out, and the US talked about phasing down projects that were unabated. What has been the biggest obstacle to having that language and not something stronger?
If you could repeat, I couldn't hear you very well.
I've seen the cover decision. We've written a story today that COP holds off on pledging to phase down oil and gas. What is the biggest obstacle to that?
Again, the covering decision is still in the process of being formulated. Whatever circulation you might have seen is still a work in progress, and I don't think one should jump to any conclusions. We are still in a phase of deliberations to see how best to provide an outcome, a covering decision that, while responds to the interests of parties, does not provide any form of backtracking or relinquishing of any previous commitments.
So you're optimistic that we can still see some stronger language?
Well, we are working diligently as president to encourage all to rise to the occasion, to show the necessary ambition, and to maintain the momentum.
Loss and damage has been much talked about from the very start of this COP, and some would say it is perhaps the most controversial issue of all. Are you still hopeful that you can get something meaningful on loss and damage? And maybe you could define for me what you would see as meaningful.
Well, definitely. I think in the incorporation of the item on the agenda in itself is progress that should not be diminished after 28 years of discussion and deliberation and lack of conversion. To have it on the agenda, I think, is a recognition of the now common understanding by all of the absolute necessity to deal with this agenda item.
Do you think you've laid the groundwork for a new compensation fund? Will there be a new fund?
Well, the issue, of course, is rather complex, and as you know, there is a divergent views on the best way forward and what constitutes the financial facility that might be agreed to. All of this is a matter for the parties to deliberate, to discuss, and to reach a point of convergence on. But there is strong positions by a vast number of the parties, especially in the developing world, that seeks a positive outcome that can demonstrate, again, a recognition of the issue and a commitment to addressing it.
Well, commitment is laudable. Money is what delivers change in every walk of life. Are China and India ready to pay in and deliver funds to loss and damage? What progress, if at all, from those two countries?
Well, you'd have to refer to them to express whatever position. My role is to encourage all to come to a point of convergence and compromise that provides that this is a viable context, that the COP still is capable of dealing with the issues of climate change. And I think what we have witnessed this year in devastating weather patterns and the floodings in Pakistan has highlighted the need for addressing loss and damage and also recognizing that it has become a central issue within the climate change agenda.
Is it still realistic for this audience and for the world to believe that we can get and limit global average temperatures to well below 2 degrees Celsius, and ideally 1.5?
Well, I think we have no other alternative but to continue to put faith and to demonstrate our ability to deal with climate change and to put in place the necessary procedures, whether for mitigation or adaptation. Many have referred to the intervention of the dinosaur during this COP and the potential of extinction of humanity if we continue to address matters within the narrow national interests and relinquish what is an existential threat to all of humanity.
And on that point of adaptation, I mean, many people have said to me, based in the Middle East, that this was going to be an African COP, and in many ways, the adaptation that the world is hoping for, again, comes back to delivery of cash and capital. The EU are putting in €1 billion for adaptation and 60 million for loss and damage. When you see that number, does that show leadership, or does that show the gap and the distance that we have to go?
It certainly highlights the gap, and it certainly shows, on the one hand, that there is a desire to provide the necessary finance. But I think all are in unison that there is a substantial gap, especially when it comes to adaptation, that the provision of finance to African countries and to others. This is a COP held on African soil, but it is a COP of the parties. And the issue of adaptation and the provision of finance and the resources that can be available, whether through public or private or through the international financial institutions, must be enhanced and must be provided in terms of concessionary loans and to take into account the developmental objectives of the developing countries and especially Africa. So much more has to be done. And we recognize that this COP is being convened under global circumstances, economic global circumstances, that has put additional pressure on the resources available.
And that additional pressure is also from the war between Ukraine and Russia as Europe looks for alternative sources to gas. Frans Timmermans today, over the past couple of days, has said gas can play a transitional role for Africa. It can be part of the development to a green economy. But the detractors would say, well, the EU is just using Africa as a gas station. And it's going to leave Africa with a lot of fossil fuel kit. Is the EU treating Africa as a gas station?
Well, I believe that we have always discussed the issue of just transition, and at the same time, the current pressures associated with the Ukrainian crisis is having an impact, but that impact should in no way provide opportunity for backtracking, nor should it also limit our ability to, for developing countries, for African countries, to continue on the path of sustainable development, while they have on every occasion demonstrated their willingness to a just transition, provided the resources, provided the exchange of technology. But until now, there is a deficiency that and a gap that has to be fulfilled.
You will hand the baton across to the UAE. The question, I suppose, we'll see what is resolved in Sharm el-Sheikh by the end of the week. But as you hand over to the UAE, what do you think 2023 will be? What do you think will be in the hands of the UAE to carry forward from what you've achieved?
Well, there are areas that we are providing the platform and basis, legally issues to be fulfilled in the Emirates. Among them is the global goal on adaptation, and to carry through on what will be addressed in terms of loss and damage during this session, and that might be further refined, developed, and agreed upon in the Emirates.
Time is of the essence here, and I want to get through another couple of issues. For loss and damage, what's the one thing that you hope happens before the close of business in Sharm el-Sheikh this week?
Well, my hopes are unlimited. My ambitions are unlimited, but I have to also be practical and be guided by the ability of the parties to reach a consensus, that they should show flexibility, and they should reflect the political will of their leaders. When they spoke in the summit, many recognized the importance of loss and damage and the importance of providing the financial facility necessary to impact and to have an ability to address the needs of various countries that have been impacted. We hope that the political will demonstrated by the leaders will trickle down to the negotiators, and thereby there will be a higher degree of ambition.
We're just about to speak to the President of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky. The audience, it's packed. You've had a tough time. Food prices, infrastructure. You've been at the tough end also of this war. What is your message to Mr. Zelensky, who is waiting in the other Zoom room?
Well, definitely the whole world has been impacted by the war in Ukraine, and as an Arab country that is part of the Arab Contact Group that has visited both Russia and met with the Ukrainian officials to provide an opportunity for a political resolution of this conflict. We are continuing to advocate for a political resolution that can fulfill the maintenance of Ukrainian sovereignty and independence and territorial integrity, and deals with all of the outstanding issues that have initiated this conflict.
But with that in mind, you have negotiated, you're one of the constants in foreign policy in Egypt. What is the building block to delivering an off-ramp here? What is the most important thing the world can do to help convene some kind of a road away from war?
Well, certainly it is a matter of the political will that can be demonstrated by those involved in the conflict, but also by the international community and utilizing the mechanisms that are available. There are several mechanisms. There are several countries that are closely involved and have offered their good offices, and it is really time to utilize them to the best possible for the benefit of international peace and security.
Minister, thank you for taking the time. I hope to see you in your office in Cairo again. Quite an impressive office, I've got to say. That is the Minister for COP, the President for COP27, Sameh Shoukry, joining us here. I hand over to our Editor-in-Chief now for the conversation to carry forward. Excellency.
Thank you.